content on Facebook to go viral so easily. My wife and I made a compilation of like our most popular vines. For those of you who don't know, we used to be music viners. That's how we started our careers 6 years ago. But it took us about 10 minutes to edit. We threw together our most popular ones, posted it to Facebook. 14 million views. The most views a Vine compilation got on our YouTube channel was 500,000. I mean, 500,000 is a great number. I'm not complaining about that, but it's not 14 million. The problem I have with Facebook is that while it does everything, it's not really the best at anything. And I don't think they try to be. Facebook is kind of like the Walmart of social media. And I think this is heavily shown with their gaming platform, that they saw how massive the gaming industry was getting. They wanted a slice of that revenue pie, so they made a couple tweaks to their UI to fit the gaming narrative. They bought one giant streamer to show, hey, look, even big streamers can stream on our platform. And then they haven't really done anything since except host a party at PAX West that didn't have air conditioning, which, by the way, that wasn't fun. But I think they're kind of okay with that. They're getting their slice of the pie. They have streamers making them money, and that's all they want. And there are a handful of reasons that make me feel this way. I think the best example that I have a personal experience with is their copyright system. I mean, you guys know I created Stream Beats with the intent of allowing streamers to play it completely copyright free with no copyright strikes, played in the background of your live streams, in the background of your YouTube videos. And I get about 5 to 10 tweets a day from people saying, hey, my Facebook stream got shut down mid-stream and I was playing nothing but your Stream Beats. I've also heard of streamers getting their entire Facebook account shut down due to in-game music that Facebook grabbed them for. When I first launched Stream Beats, I reached out to every platform and I hit up my contact at Facebook, Phil, who's an absolute boss, by the way. So Phil connected me with the Facebook music team. I sent them everything that they asked for, and then, you know, it would take them a couple weeks to respond, and they go, oh, yeah, we'll see what we can do. Why don't you try sending us all your ISRC codes? So I copied and pasted every single ISRC code, sent it to them, never heard back. I mean, the bottom line is Facebook does need to protect themselves from copyright litigation, but rather than build out a solid copyright foundation to fix the problem, it's just easier to throw their creators under the bus. They're making the money that they need. Who cares if some streamers get shut down? What are people gonna do? Leave Facebook? Just something to keep in mind as we complain about YouTube and Twitch not caring about their creators so much. Facebook, they do not have your back. So the way I've come to understand this, making content on Facebook versus YouTube, is that on Facebook, you can expect stuff to grow much, much easier. Stuff catches on like wildfire. Your reach on Facebook is massive. However, the ceiling on YouTube is much higher. If you can fight through a little bit of a thicker battle over on YouTube, you can go farther. And so it just kind of depends on where you think your potential is. Do you have the potential to win on YouTube, or should you try Facebook? Or honestly, again, you should post content to both, but you know, where do you want to stream to? Let's move on to the dedicated streaming platforms. Twitch. Twitch, the platform that I stream on, has one thing going for it. And that one thing is that it is the biggest platform for streaming. That's literally it. They got in the game early. 99% of all the top streamers are on Twitch. And if you are a big streamer, you are known as the biggest streamers. It is the YouTube of dedicated streaming platforms. That's about where the good things end with Twitch. I don't know, maybe you could say that the website's a little more robust. It probably has the best UI for streaming with things like ModView, with things like how clean it is, that it's basically your stream scene and your chat taking up the entire side versus YouTube's streaming UI, which I think is just a mess. So similar to YouTube, if you can grow on Twitch and become a top streamer on Twitch, you can go further than any other streaming platform. It has so much more headroom, such a higher ceiling. However, it is almost impossible to do that nowadays. I mean, just in general, streaming as your only source of content is a bad strategy. Very few people grow by streaming daily and making zero other content. At the end of the day, most people just don't like browsing through live streams as much as they enjoy browsing through short form content or video content. And we don't need to dive into this. I've talked about this in like 10 different YouTube videos. But Twitch needs some kind of discoverability tool. And I don't mean like a recommending live streams. I mean browsable content. Twitch needs to up their clip game and make it possible to browse through funny clips. And when they find one they like, they can go follow that person's live stream. Clicking on a 15-second clip is much less of a commitment than clicking on a live stream expecting to have to watch for 5 to 10 minutes before you really understand who that person is. Which leaves us with Mixer. And last time I talked about Mixer in a video, which was when I was answering Twitter questions, a lot of Mixer streamers got mad at me. And so while we talk about Mixer, let's also talk about that because this is very important. The only thing Mixer has going for it right now is the fact that it is a smaller platform. And so it's easier to moderate. The community is more positive, which if that's what's most important to you, then that's a great place to be. If you're trying to make a career out of streaming, Mixer is a bad place to be right now. A lot of people say that because Mixer is a smaller platform, it's a lot easier to get discovered. Twitch is too saturated. The bottom line is Mixer is actually more saturated, just in a smaller area. According to Twitch Tracker, which tracks both Twitch and Mixer, for every single streamer, there are about 22 to 23 viewers on the platform. On Mixer, for every one streamer, there are, 3.2 viewers. The site is 7 times more saturated with streamers than Twitch is. These aren't my opinion. These are objective problems with the platform. Mixer isn't doing anything to fix this. Shroud went on stream a couple weeks ago and said, in order to get a good streaming platform, all you have to do is sit and wait. I completely disagree. I think Mixer needs to be doing something. They need to be adding features, something that makes them a better platform for streamers and viewers than Twitch, and there just really isn't anything like that right now. And the biggest problem is that Mixer streamers are afraid to call them out because they don't want their platform to die. I mean, you guys watched the previous 3 minutes of this video when I called out Twitch. I criticize Twitch all the time. And whenever I do that, Twitch streamers gather around me and say, yes, we would love Twitch to change this. Let's fix Twitch. Let's let them know what we want. And yet when I say one criticism on Mixer, they all jump to Mixer's defense. And guys, if you want your platform to survive, you need to be holding them accountable. At this rate, I wouldn't be shocked if Mixer shut down in the next 5 years. They've already laid off half their staff. They're on a skeleton crew. They're not doing anything anymore. Mixer streamers, let Mixer know what your platform needs. Now, just to reiterate, if you're looking for a small platform to stream on for fun and you're looking for something a little more positive, uplifting, that is what you get with a smaller community, and that's the one situation where I'd recommend it. However, if you're trying to turn this into a career, I do not recommend streaming on Mixer. At least if you're starting today. Obviously, if you already have a large following and an audience on Mixer, I'm not saying give that up. I'm just saying if you're looking for a platform to start on, Mixer's probably not your guy. So just to understand my thought process behind what I've chosen, I chose to make content primarily on YouTube and to stream primarily on Twitch. That decision was made because I had experience in creating content and I believed I knew the platform well enough to fight through that crowd and come out on top. However, it's been high on my priority list to take my YouTube content, kind of reformat it to what works on Facebook and start posting more stuff there. There's just no reason I shouldn't be hitting that audience as well. If you're looking for faster initial growth, even if the ceiling's a little bit lower, and you're okay with a platform that you need to be careful of, Facebook might be your guy. Start streaming there. Or if you, unlike me, don't mind putting all your eggs in one basket and you want to be on a top level platform, all encompassed on one platform, YouTube might be the way to go. There are strengths and weaknesses of all of these, and it just depends on what you want and where you want to go with it. So take a second, sit back, pick a platform that you think is where you want to be, and give it a shot for a couple months. And if it's not working, you have the option to switch and try a new one. There's no rush here. And if you have any other questions or you want to further the discussion with me, I'm open to talking about all these platforms. I stream every Monday, Wednesday, Saturday on Twitch at noon Pacific time. Link to that in the description below. Or if you want to meet a giant community of people who all might share your opinions or differing opinions, our Discord has about 60,000 members, all streamers, all trying to better themselves. Jump in there, find some friends, find some people to stream with. Link to that also in the description down below. And as always, happy streaming. You need anything?
Should we go say hello?
You should say hello.
I'm gonna go say hi. We'll see what's up.
Go say hello.
Okay, what's up, dudes? Oh no.
Did they? They're shooting at you. Go run! And they're running. They're running. Let me in.
Oh, come in.
Oh! J'ai perdu. Pas à date, y'a rien. Bon. Hey, c'est quoi?
Hello there, right here, and today we will be looking at all the secrets to do with axolotls, answering questions like can you use axolotls to make a trident farm, and what other powers do they hold. And at the end of the video, we'll be looking at some cool ways to use the new container breaking mechanic to help possibly make automation better. And if you'd like to see more in-depth videos like this, check out the snapshot playlist down below. And we're still trying to reach 7,000 followers on Discord, so make sure to join my Discord down below. We did a 3-hour-long live stream with the viewers, testing out all the new things as the snapshot comes out. So make sure you follow me on Twitch to participate in future ones. And thanks to everybody who joined in on the last one. This new mob axolotl is peaceful towards the player and is amphibious, meaning that it can go on land as well as go in water. They do have a limited time that they can stay on the land without dying, and this is their air NBT. It starts at 6,000, it slowly goes down, and in 5 minutes it'll go down to 0. And as soon as they touch water, it will immediately be refilled. Unlike the player's air bubbles, which have to slowly regenerate. Rain will also regenerate their air supply, but only if the air ever reaches the ground. Like here in the desert, this guy will not be helped out by it. But in the desert, they don't dry out any faster. Now, some things that don't rehydrate them are like water splash bottles, fire-resistant potions. They also don't rehydrate from dripstone dripping particles, or even having them inside of a cauldron with water. Currently, their pathfinding is a little bit messed up, where they'll try to go to the nearest piece of water, even if it's through a block, which causes them to tip upside down on their heads and rotate in these little circles. Speaking of rotating in circles, if you would have one of them tied to a lead, these guys will start zipping around you like there is no tomorrow. And you can even attach this lead to a fence and they'll just go around in circles. And if you put them in water, they even go faster yet. This is most likely a bug, but it is pretty funny. They do only have 14 health, which doesn't make them as strong as things like zombies, makes them stronger than something like a cow. And after drying up, they will start taking damage until they die. Speaking of dying, if one of these would be killed even with a high looting sword, you'll see that they will not give you any items, but they do give you some XPs. The amount of XPs you get is 3. These guys do make some pretty cool sounds, kind of similar to the fox, very high-pitched noise. When they get damaged, they also make some high-pitched noises. They also take fall damage, but there is a weird bug that when summoned in a mob that relies on being in the water or having air, so such as like a squid or axolotl, when you summon them in, they will have their air set to 0, and therefore they'll immediately start taking damage. And you can see this in a squid as well. Now there is 5 variations of these guys: pink, brown, yellow, white, and dark blue or purple. These 4 are common, where this one is extremely rare, being 1 in 1,200 ocelots. When the Caves and Cliffs update comes out, you should be able to find these guys inside of caves. And you can get the rarest variant by using this command here, and you can see what it looks like. You can make axolotls follow you by holding some tropical fish or tropical fish in a bucket. You can breed these guys if you find them by feeding them tropical fish, which is a little bit harder to find fish than the other types. Make sure you're not holding the fish in their hand so that they're able to breed. And there you go, you got a baby. Baby is usually like the parents, but it can be different. You can speed up the growth of a baby by feeding him more tropical fish until he is an adult. But you can see when they grow up, they kind of glitch into the walls. Now, despite breeding these up and getting a baby out of them, they're not tameable like wolves. So if you're under attack by like a drowned, they're not going to come to your rescue and start attacking this guy. Now, you can encourage them to attack stuff like guardians and drowns just by being near this type of hostile mob while also holding the tropical fish. So now you can see they are going to start attacking this guy. But when they attack him, he's also going to attack them. If their health gets low, they can pretend to be dead like they are doing right now, in which case they will get the regen effect, but they can still accidentally die when being attacked. Now, when they do kill something that they kind of did on your behalf, since they're not a tame mob, you will still not get player-specific loot. So you won't get like tridents from drowns or special loot like tropical fish from guardians. Now, if they do have low health and you try to feed them tropical fish, you're not able to bring their health up. Mobs like drowns and guardians will actually automatically attack before they even attack them. You can see this guy has targeted this and is hurting him, and he's playing dead. Now this guy got hit, he's playing dead, even though these guys aren't attacking. So they won't naturally attack back, even if they're being attacked by the drown or guardian. And you can see this with the guardian where he is trying to shoot these guys. The little laser thing doesn't show up currently, but you can see the bubbles, and he just shot this guy without them ever attacking him. This guy here is actually still spinning in circles while also being in the regen mode. Now, besides using tropical fish to entice them, you can also use a bucket of tropical fish. So if I just hold this one near this guardian, you can see he comes over here and tries to attack him. Now, unlike drowns or guardians, which these guys have to be enticed to fight using tropical fish, there is some things that these guys will attack naturally without any player encouragement. Things like cod, they will kill those pretty quickly. Salmon, also tropical fish, even pufferfish. Pufferfish don't actually become big when they're attacked by these guys, so they don't take any damage from the spikes or poisoning. They also attack squids.
500.
So you could use these guys to kind of farm up fish loot or squid loot without having to worry about them taking any damage. Now, they do not attack stuff like dolphins or turtles, which are also in the water. Now, these guys are affected by bubble columns. The ascending ones will move them upwards, where the descending ones will pull them downwards, allow them to take damage. Bubble columns are one of the unique blocks where water mobs can get water from them, and mobs that need air can also get air from them. You can pick these guys up inside of a boat if you push them near it, but if you leave the axolotl inside of a boat on top of water, they will still dry out and die. You can also pick them up with a minecart by using a curved rail. They're affected by powder snow just like any other mob. It doesn't matter what mob attacks them. If it's like a Johnny Vindicator or a Zoglin, they will try to play dead if their health gets so low. But sometimes they just end up dying because they get hit for too hard. And they are peaceful, so they won't attack those mobs that hurt them, and they won't even attack other types of mobs like zombies until they turn into drowns. Now, if you do help them by killing a drown that was hurting it, there's a chance that he will give you the regeneration effect and remove any mining fatigue that you might have. Now, when it comes to Ocelot going after something that it can attack, like this cod, they can detect it up to 10 blocks away. This was looked into by Tibby in the Minecraft code, so thanks to them. You can catch these guys with a water bucket just by right-clicking on them, but every bucket will look exactly the same, similar to the tropical fish buckets. You can't tell if you have a rare variation unless you would drop it out. Now, besides axolotl, they also added this really cool feature where if a bundle or shulker box contains items, when it gets destroyed, it will only destroy the container first, and then the items will get popped out of it. So in this case, I have some netherite ingots and a nether star. You can see the bundle breaks open, items fall out. The nether star is not immune to lava, so it burns up where the nether bricks are, so they don't burn up. Now, this can actually create some very interesting situations where you have items inside of a bundle, inside of a shulker box. Let's add some filter items. Now, if this shulker box would fall into lava, see it pops open with all the bundles and everything, and then the bundle breaks, and then the contents of the bundle burn up if it can. So it has to kind of go through 2 layers of burning before it can actually get to the bundles items. So if one TNT would blow up this shulker box here, you'll see that instead of anything getting lost, all it does is break off the box as an item form, and everything is still safe inside. Now, if you use 2 TNT, you'll notice something different happens. 1 TNT will blow up the box, and 1 will blow up the item of the box, dropping its items. So you have all those filler items. We also got the bundle in here, but the items plus the bundle are still safe. So let's use 3 TNT. If you guys don't know how TNT works, essentially each one actually goes off at a different time. Even though they seem to go off at the same game tick, the game can only do one thing at a time. So the first TNT will break the box off into item form. Next one will blow up the shulker box item, which will drop its contents. And then the third TNT will blow up those contents, blowing up all the pufferfish plus the bundle. So then the items inside the bundle pop out. And this all happens at the exact same time. So if you actually want to blow up the contents of this bundle here, you actually need 4 TNT. So let's put 4 TNT down and ignite them all. And you should see that there is nothing left of the shulker box, none of the items. But there's actually one item, which is the nether stars that got blasted way over here. And that's because nether stars are actually immune to explosions. So if we ignite this TNT, these items will get moved, but they won't actually blow up. They're right there. It gets even crazier when the player is holding the shulker box and he has a totem of undying. Because of this, you need an initial TNT to remove the totem. Then you need a TNT to kill the player, drop his shulker box. Then you need a TNT to break the shulker box open. Then 1 to destroy those contents, including the bundle. And then 1 to destroy the bundle's items. So if we take a look, doesn't look like there's really anything here. Like a blew everything up, but we should still be able to find the nether star. Ah, there's another star. It got blasted away over here. So yeah, if you do it properly, you can destroy all the items, even in multiple layers, but it's going to take timing and a lot of TNT. Now, any type of explosion will do this, which there is a lot of, including like wither explosions. But other things can also do it, like a cactus. If we drop it onto a cactus, you'll see it'll burst open. And then when the bundle touches it, it also bursts open. Any items that are still thrown towards the cactus will be destroyed, where the rest will sit onto the ground. You could use this as a way to unpack stuff from like a bundle very quickly by making it touch lava while picking up the items, or even a shulker box. That means you would have to craft a shulker box or bundle. Bundles are kind of annoying. They only hold 64 worth of items. So you wouldn't really gain anything from that. For shulker boxes, cost shulker shells, even though they're now renewable using my automatic shulker shell farm. I'll link it down below. We still have to craft the shells with a chest, and shulker boxes are not stackable. So it'd be kind of an expensive way to unload your items. It'd be better to just use a dropper to drop them out, or you could even have a system automatically fill up a chest and then use explosions to remove the chest to get all the items, because chests are quite a bit easier to get and craft than a shulker box. Another damaging method is a anvil. Usually anvils, when they land on items, they will destroy them. And you can see it will now break open the shulker box and drop its contents. So if you have a whole bunch of shulker boxes with items in them and you drop an anvil in them, it's going to make hundreds and thousands of items. That's 1,100 right there. And that makes the game pretty laggy. Fire also works, so if you make a fire and burn the shulker box, you see it should break open. There it goes. Items have health, and once it gets low enough, it breaks open. Now when it comes to the dragon destroying these shulker boxes full of items, the dragon will actually just remove the block from the game and it won't drop any of the contents. This might change in the future to make it more consistent with the other methods. A lot of cool features for the axolotl as well, the container breaking. If you haven't already, make sure to leave a like on the video as well as share it with others so they can see all the cool things you can do in 1.17. I would like to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye!
que là, tout ça vient ici. Là. Faut que je faire un gros farm. Este. Oh là, McLovin, tabarnak! Voyez plus brillant que ça. Eita, tem medo? Medo. Ih, c'est bon ça? Ah, right. Right! You. Woo-hoo! Ah, ah. 9. Just feel correct. Nice. Whee! Oh. Woo! Oh, no. Ok, j'ai fait un petit bout, c'est bon. Ok. Breathe. 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 Act the two at least. Pour stack d'ancient debris, par exemple. Good tech, yo. die. Fuck. Have that. Non, j'ai pas de basalt. Our time's really spam at the farm. Avec também. Também c'est un de mes préférés. Et des beaux tutorials.
Hi guys and welcome, Gnemon here. Today we'll be looking at gold farming. Why gold farming is important? It's not because gold is an important item or crafting component, because it isn't. You need a bit of it to make golden rails or maybe golden carrots at occasion, but since 1.16 gold can be replaced by piglin trading for pretty much all interesting nether based items, so it's kinda the equivalent of nether emerald, so to speak. So here's for example a very simple bartering setup you can use, just 4 blocks in total. It's just a pressure plate, dropper, redstone torch and a regular block. In terms of what you can replace the gold into, we have here nether bricks, glowstone, all sorts of obsidians, quartz, leather, renewable soul sand, and one of the most important things, renewable gravel, which is like halfway through into renewable concrete, which is half awesome, I guess. And sometimes you can get even an elusive netherite hoe, so getting large amounts of gold is now very much desired. The designs we'll be talking about here today are not super crazy. I mean, we won't be requiring to break entire bedrock ceilings in an area and build massive perimeters. We'll stay way above the bedrock, trying to minimize the conditioning efforts we'll have to do, but also we'll be using what's available and intended in this game to get as much reasonable gold as possible. I myself have an opinion that you should avoid using glitches and unintended quirky mechanics if you can. Not because it's not fun, it's just because it adds longevity to your designs that you spend your precious times on. Quirks and bugs could very well be patched at any point, even unintentionally as a part of cleanups in the codebase, but official features from the game release notes should stay protected. Before we go into the explanation of the mechanics we'll be using here today, we should look into what's trending these days in terms of gold farming. The best mob to get gold from is without doubt the zombified piglin. And since we'll be using this name a lot of times in this video and it's kinda long, I came up with a short nickname that we can use for them. Let's call them for now Pigmen. It's good, isn't it? So it seems like pretty much most of the designs right now you can find are using the pigment aggro chain reaction and are built on top of the nether. Building the farm on top of the nether means that the spawn is gonna be a little slower, but has this benefit of not needing too much spawn proofing to be done around the farm. And in most cases when you build it just right above the build limit, we don't need to do anything apart from the farm itself. To get on top of the nether is extremely simple these days. There are multiple ways of doing it. The simplest is just to grab a nether pearl off of a nether enderman, which now has plenty of them. Go up and locate the highest bedrock block, that's at Y127, place a ladder below it and just throw an ender pearl while walking forward. From there you just need to build a portal on the other side, link it with the portal on the overworld side and you should be good. So regarding the aggro setups, they're very simple. You just stay in the middle, aggro one pigman against you and they'll spread the aggro better than a pandemic and run towards you. So here's a very simple setup you can do published by Random Games. However, since the pigmen need to have direct contact with you at all times, the optimal layout of the farm just needs to be flat. The good thing about these designs is that they'll generate XP. Not the greatest amounts, but good enough for most players. However, we are definitely not maxing out XP of pigmen over here. But on the upside, the XP we are getting here is totally passive. While this has been like that in the game for a while, this is a little weird, that the player doesn't need to do anything and still gets XP. In fact, holding a looting sword doesn't give you more loot, which is something that you should have expected from player kills. Is this part of the intended mechanics? Probably not. Is this ever gonna get changed? Probably not as well, since the player base really got used to these designs, but it's just probably. Thankfully today we will not be relying on this, but on much more intended mechanics that shouldn't get patched, so we are fine. So how much we are getting from this particular farm? It's about 12,000 drops, which includes about 5,000 nuggets and about 250 ingots per hour. Spawn-wise, we are at 11,000 pigmen. Mob cups are full, right above 20%, so this farm is actually nicely optimized for the design. In general, it's not bad, but it could be improved. One thing that we can do is replace minecarts with a player just standing and sweeping a sword. And that's definitely something intended. We are not only getting XP from proper player kills, but also reap the rewards of looting. So in this case, we are getting up to 45,000 items per hour and over 21,000 nuggets and 600 ingots. So it's much better. Spawn-wise, it's actually exactly the same because we haven't changed anything in the design of the farm. The fact is, a typical pigman has to spawn, has to react to the player, then run. It runs fairly quickly, but still it'll take it some time to run this distance. Then needs to find its way into the death pit and get killed, typically with 2 swipes. I mean, they are running pretty fast, but on average it will take them about 23 seconds from the time they're spawned to the time they free up their mob cap for the next one to spawn. Which, if we calculate the mob spawn rates using the spawn rates equation, it means that we should get about 11,000 mobs per hour with that timing. So we are pretty much on point. So let's check some faster designs in this category. So this is, for example, Il Mango's farm, which I have fixed for 116. It's faster because mobs have shorter path to the player, but it will be harder to apply looting since you have 4 different chambers. However, in this farm it takes about 17 seconds from spawn to kill, so that's why this farm is that much faster. So if we want our farm to be even faster, we need to shorten that time even more. And that's why we'll be using probably the slowest pigman aggro mechanics there is, the turtle eggs. First of all, it seems like the pigmen need to notice the egg, and it will move slowly towards it. Also, unfortunately, there is no speed bonus for pigmen when they chase the eggs like there is one when they chase the player when they get aggro. They just walk towards the egg with their normal speed. Thankfully, they'll do that consistently, and they'll do that even if the player is ways away, meaning that we can get them to spawn, work towards the egg, and drop them either directly to the demise or directly in front of the player. And by building this farm high above the bedrock, we'll minimize the spawn proofing that needs to be done for the farm to be effective. But still, we'll need to do some of it, at least for the player looting version. Thankfully, while it takes them a very long and random time to decide to go towards the eggs, when they just spawn, it's actually a very different story, and it'll take them exactly 2 seconds to do the first egg scan, which shortens the initial spawning and starting time to a manageable and predictable value of 2 seconds. 2 seconds is not ideal, and it's not acceptable in some super crazy farm situations, but in this case, if in the player aggro farm we have seen total lifetimes of 20 seconds and higher, and it wasn't really a big deal there, it shouldn't be a big deal here either. Now, to combat the other problem, their very slow walking speeds, instead of building a few very large spawning platforms, which you can do, we'll be building smaller platforms. Just more of them, stacked one on top of each other. So how big are these platforms is completely unimportant for the drop-only farm, since you can always stay AFK above it, at the very top of the build limit. But for the looting and XP, so player kill option, we need to stay below the spawning spaces, which will make us do trade-offs between larger but fewer floors, meaning that there will be less spawnable nether within the player range to spawn proof, or smaller floors for faster delivery times, but with more spawn proofing to do. And we'll try to find a sweet spot for that. But before we need to do that, we have to understand how a zombie finds its egg. And by a quick search through the game code, we arrive at this monstrosity. And the first egg that gets found with that code gets used. I'll typically rather try to make sense of it, but thankfully I don't have to. So here's a copy-pasted equivalent Scarpet code doing exactly the same thing, which I just hooked up some random event with some boilerplate code around it. Still, I don't know what it code does exactly, but I assume it's fine since it came directly from the Minecraft programmers. So let's see what happens. What can go wrong running some random piece of code? So what you can see from here is that the pigman searches for eggs up to 24 blocks away, 3 blocks up and 3 blocks down from the block that he's standing on. And that's 17,000 blocks in total. Scanning going outwards first, right below its feet, and then it will alternate going up and then below, scanning the same area. It definitely prefers some general direction, as we can see here, but what is interesting is that certain Y levels will always be preferred. Also, regardless of the Y value, the range is pretty huge, 24 blocks out, starting from the center. This does mean that we can pretty much build a large 50 by 50 spawning pad, but it will take them ages to go towards the egg, which would mean that our farm would be super slow. Since we are not limited by having the constant direct contact to the player like with the aggro-based gold farms, we can design a farm that maximizes the pigman XP, allowing to grab all the looting-based gold as well. So to find these limits, we have to look at the pigments themselves. They drop 6, 7 or 8 XP when killed, yielding 2, 1 or 2 XP orbs respectively. That's really nice. On average, this gives 7 XP with 1 and 2/3 orbs per mob. I'm ignoring for now all the baby pigment and special cases pigment because this will unnecessarily complicate the estimation. Since players can ingest 10 XP orbs per second, to get that they need to kill 6 pigment per second. To get the 6 pigment per second, the farm needs to spawn 21,500 pigment per hour. From that we can estimate that with this expected rate, we should aim to have the cycle time for pigment at most 11 2/3 of a second. Now with 21,600 pigment per hour, we should be getting, with looting 3, 2 pieces of gold nuggets and rotten flesh. We also have 1200 gold bars and 2500 gold swords per hour, totaling 90,000 drops per hour. And these 21,600 pigment would also yield 150,000 XP per hour. That's the theory. 11.5 seconds? That's actually a hell lot of time. We also need to make sure that the pigment is the only mob that can spawn in our farm. Thankfully, we have the technology to achieve exactly that. There are currently 5 biomes and 2 structures present in the Nether at the time of this recording. Nether Waste spawning 60% pigment, 30% gas, which mostly fail, and 10% piglin. Crimson Forest, where only 10% are pigment, Warped Forest, which just spawn Endermen, Soul Sand Valleys with no pigment spawning, only gas and skeletons, and Basalt Deltas with only gas and magma cubes. So Nether Waste is the only biome that's reasonable to make a zombie pigment farm. While other mobs can spawn much rarer, we still need to take care of them. Thankfully 2 of them burn, meaning that they would fail to spawn on magma blocks, and the other 2 are so large so the too high ceiling of our spawning floors would prevent them from spawning altogether. This does mean that the farm needs to be made out of magma blocks, since otherwise we won't be able to prevent piglin from spawning, since otherwise they will share the same hitbox and spawning conditions as pigmen. Thankfully, magma blocks are abundant in the Nether for those that gather their resources via exploration, and also can be crafted from easily farmable resources for those who are eco-friendly and prefer renewability and sustainability over destroying the environment. So the general design of the farm will be as follows. We'll have a series of spawning floors with 2 high space with turtle bait on one side. Since pigmen see the eggs up to 3 blocks up and down, we'll be able to share the eggs for each pairs of floors. This also allows us to control fully which eggs they use as their target. Between pigmen and the egg, we need to pull out a wall of trapdoors. This would allow them to think that they can pathfind to the egg while blocking their access to them. Now, one thing we need to worry about is for them getting stuck on the last block, which apparently is a combination of a pathfinding mechanic and magic. To save you guys some gore details, this is the only position which is on the upper air block of the bottom floor that both pigmen from both floors are willing to go for it. And that the other requirement for that egg is that it has to have a block below it. If it doesn't have it, the pigmen will fail to pathfind when they pass the last block that they stand on. When you add that last block, which is on the feet level of the bottom platform, this will make them kinda jump every time they're on the edge of the platform, making sure that they'll actually fall. For example, if the egg is 1 block higher, they'll always be able to get stuck regardless if the egg has or doesn't have any block below them. Why this works this way? I said the complicated answer is pathfinding and the simpler answer is magic. Thankfully, if the egg is on the eye level of the bottom floor guys, and A, any of the eggs is supported with a block for the bottom floor guys, and B, all the eggs are supported for the top floor guys, this makes all the pigmen from both floors successfully fall to their trap. Gathering turtle eggs is rather straightforward and pleasant activity. For small amounts, it involves feeding and breeding 2 naturally spawned turtles in the location they naturally spawned to get a few starter eggs. And for the mass eggs farming, just create a large sand platform, safe from other mobs, and spread across your breeding area. Once the turtles hatched and grow, just breed them and collect their eggs as much as you need. You need a Silk Touch tool to pick up the eggs. Just don't try to move the turtles away from their birthplace like you would do with cows or pigs, since they won't be able to lay their eggs away from the place that they were spawned. So our first design is built solely for the drops. The player is AFKing up in the skies to have just the edges of the corner hoppers somewhat in range. So if we check, all this area that's inside of this AFK sphere is outside of the main parts of the Nether. The spawning area is actually minuscule. We only have 3 white strips on both ends of the line of eggs. I guess this makes them 6 wide since they meet in the middle, but this gives a maximum of 3 blocks of travel for the pigmen to their demise. Timing wise, we have 2 seconds of a mandatory delay, 2 seconds of walk time, a fall and death, and 1 more second, worth about 6 seconds of lifetime. So we should be getting about 40,000 pigmen per hour. to fill up the mob cap with this design, we needed 8 layers of this pattern spawning over 4 square chunks. Pigmen fall and splat in the hoppers below, and since they will have some momentum towards the middle from the pathfinding towards the egg, we don't need any extra railings to contain them. And since we have several hopper lines collecting all of our loot, collection shouldn't be a problem. Each hopper line is limited to 9,000 drops per hour, but we have several of them scattered around, so if we collect them in 8 different points, the item collection shouldn't be an issue. Spawn-wise, we are getting almost exactly what we have predicted, with little over 20% filled mob caps, so we are in this very sweet spot for the farm of this size, where we barely reached the mob cap, yet we did not build the farm way too large for its capabilities. So what's next? So far we have matched the drop rates of an aggro-based pigment farm with looting using an egg design without using looting. With over 40,000 spawns per hour, we can actually slow the farm down almost twice, and that should allow us to get the maximum 150,000 XP per hour and 90,000 drops per hour situation. But for that we need a different design. We need to either deliver the pigment to the AFK player up top or flip the farm upside down so we can drop them down below. Obviously the other option is way simpler, but that would require us to select very carefully the location for the farm, since part of the top of the nether that's within the range of the farm will need to be spawn proofed. But if we select carefully, it shouldn't be a big deal. So, we'll be sitting at some block at some point, swinging our sword at incoming pigmen. If we make an assumption that we will be above the XP limit to safely AFK, we will be hugging a lava source or a cactus just behind us. We also need 1 block distance for safety reasons, because otherwise they would be able to reach us, meaning that it will be best if we could limit the pigment to land on these 3 spots over here, since sweeping only affects mobs up to 1 block out of the hitbox of the mob that's being hit and up to 3 blocks away from the player. This means that our drop shaft would need to be ideally only 3 blocks wide. We can use more space and just compress the mobs further using pistons, for example, but that would only complicate the design and slow down the entire farm. So up top, we can actually fit that kind of a drop shaft that we just talked about if we put an egg in the middle with trapdoors on both sides, blocking the access and providing necessary pathfinding. We will need to encase the drop shafts on both sides with blocks, so whenever the pigmen spawn, they'll find their way to the egg and fall down. Now we need to find a good shape of the spawning path to allow for an even distance to the egg, so that the lifetime of a pigman is on average a maximum of 11.5 seconds in our farm. And then we just need to keep stacking the floors one below the other until we reach the mob cap, because spawning is going to be rather slow up at the top of the world. A lot of people, I've been saying that building the farms at the bottom of the world make the farm faster, which is not the case. At the bottom you can make the spawn chances higher, so you need less spawning spaces or less floors, but the farm speed is a combo of how fast you can get them to spawn and how fast you can clean them up from the mob cap. So I kinda did all the tries and errors and I kinda built a farm. Did you know that they removed the light keeping ability of the magma blocks? It was always working super sketchy. It was saving the fake light levels without saving the original light levels on the magma blocks, causing light to dissipate over time, which was a little weird. And now magma blocks are just not retaining any light levels. Just interesting observations here. Anyways, here's the final shape of the spawning path, which I engineered so that it takes exactly the same time for zombies from either edge to go to the center. So let's unfreeze the game. And now we can see how they find their way to the center. Rather quickly, and what is important is to take them roughly the same time. At the very top level, since we don't have any other floor stacks above it, we need some gas and magma block spawn protection in the form of these random glass blocks, and they are on the build limit exactly. As well as the top spawning platform is surrounded with this 1 layer of tripwire, followed by a large platform of glass or any non-spawnable block. The thing is, our farm is very tall and narrow, so just with the spawning spaces we'll be losing tons of pack spawns that could start just outside of the farm but could wander into our spawn area. In our previous slime farm episode, we've seen an improvement of about 40%, extending the spawning spaces from the default slime chunk size of 16 by 16 just by 3 blocks in all directions to 22 by 22. Here the spawning paths are roughly the same size, so we need this extra pack spawning to support extra spawns. So why do we have these strings blocks over here? It's just so that pigmen don't see these blocks as a valid blocks that can pathfind to. Weirdly, magma blocks are not doing any harm for the pigmen, yet still they avoid walking on them. So if, for example, we replace a few of these blocks with glass, just for demonstration, it doesn't always get to the shortest path to the egg. As you can see, sometimes prefers to go around the magma blocks on the glass and to that hole on the other side. Replacing all the blocks here on the edge with string, or any block that you can't walk onto, like signs, for example buttons, levers, any of these would prevent them from wanting to walk on the glass, yet still increase the top block in this area, increasing the pack spawns. In the middle, I've replaced one side of the glass wall of the drop chute with grindstones. So what was happening with the full blocks is that if two pigmen would spawn in the same distance from the drop chute, which is actually really likely, they will get stuck in the middle, which would actually be really bad for the farm. To combat it, I tried it with varying different blocks, and grindstone, of all things, turned out to be the perfect block. The thing is, we still can slightly expand the width of the drop chute to be a little more than one block, but not too much, since pigmen would fall outside of the player's sweeping reach, and just happen to be that this extra little fraction of a block is all what it takes for pigmen to actually resolve their conflicts who goes first, allowing them to get unstuck. Another positive of using grindstones is that you can alternate its placement, which makes for a really gorgeous looking and sturdy chain that we can pretend that the entire farm is kind of hanging off of it. It's just a detail, but I really like it. One extra bit here on the top floor is that we have this extra pathway that goes 24 blocks away from the closest spawning spot. The reason for that, if you don't care about looting and you just want to AFK for gold, the farm will have a simple kill mode that would harvest the pigment without the player needing to be there. Meaning that we can still AFK right above here for the full spawning effect without the need of spawn-proofing anything in the lower parts of the nether. But to get to the maximum XP and the promised 90,000 drops per hour, we need to go down to the bottom, below the farm. In total, I built here 19 spawning floors, which each of them have 210 spawning spaces, so totally you need 4,000 magma blocks, which is a little over 2 shulker boxes, which is honestly not that much, especially that magma harvests extremely easily. And because of the odd number of spawning platforms, to keep the rhythm of the egg placement, the last egg is placed right below the bottom spawning floor. And here we have the player station, 24 blocks below the last floor. Now, placing the player here means that you need to take care of the lower nether portion of the farm as well. This also means that we have to carefully select a spot where we want to build this farm, since with very careful placement, we can actually minimize our efforts for spawn proofing. In our case, you can see that still most of the area that is within the spawnable range of the player is still up in the upper portion of the nether, and only a slice of it is located under the bedrock. That's why it really pays to select a good place for such a farm. First of all, obviously it needs to be in the nether waste biome, and second of all, if we find a huge lava lake, like in this case, which is honestly quite a common place to find in the nether, you can limit your terrain that you need to take care of to the minimum. I use here beds to blow up the remaining pieces of terrain, not only as a confirmed way of blowing up the terrain in the nether, but also a simple way of spreading random fires. Random fires, well, in general annoying, has this benefit that they actually prevent zombie pigmen and endermen from spawning because of light levels, meaning that even if we don't do the perfect job with the blowing, it will actually limit the remaining spawns to the minimum. I actually did this 2 rounds of spawn proofing in this case. First was a rough one, which I missed a few caves here under the ceiling here and there, not blowing as much as I needed really, and the farm was producing 80,000 drops per hour, with a few mobs being under the bedrock ceiling. And after cleaning this extra few spots, for which you might need a spectator account or access to the commands, or if your world is a hardcore survival, just a copy of the world so you can thoroughly test it in a test world, you'll be able to raise the performance of this farm to its designed maximum of 90,000 drops per hour. In terms of the mob caps, with not even 60 mobs in the mob cap on average and under 10% of time with full mob caps, this farm is actually not large enough. We could probably even add 2 or 3 more spawning floors, but that would mean that we would need to lower the farm and do a little bit more spawn proofing in the nether side, with the spawning sphere encroaching more and more into the actual nether. As I said, your mileage may vary with your location that you've selected, and choosing a very good location, especially for this design, is extremely important. But since we are already at the maximum design maximum for the XP, I felt like stopping at 19 floors was actually a good idea. So that could be it. I mean, the pigmen will fall onto the honey blocks here at the bottom, which would prevent them from dying on impact, because honey now cushions the fall, but also allows the hopper below to suck items through the honey blocks for item collection. For the drop only mode, I just need to press this button over here, which will move out the honey blocks and soul sand from the hoppers, allowing the pigmen to fall directly to their demise. But with the player present, you want just to grip all the benefits of looting and XP, obviously. So the player will be standing here with the food in his offhand and swiping every second on the incoming pigmen. Since pigmen don't wear armor, we don't need to worry about them wearing thorns or feather falling armor, but we might get a social zombie on occasion spawning on the bottom floors of the farm. All in all, the main reason for the food is that Araging uses some saturation, but we just need a few, maybe 4 or 5 pieces of steak per hour of AFKing to stay saturated. If you're planning to AFK for longer than 12 hours at a time, I guess you need some sort of a contraption dropping you 1 steak or pork chop every 10 minutes or so. Right on this block, for example, or simply feed some rotten flesh back to the player. Not the most appealing of all available foods, but free and plenty with this particular farm. Now, the food is just a small problem. The bigger problem is that this farm, in a drop-only mode, will produce about 22,000 drops, meaning that these 3 hoppers, which each of them is limited to 9,000, can actually collect and push away this 22,000 drops no problem. But with looting mode, with over 90,000 drops, this is way above the capacities of 3 hoppers. They will be able to pick up all this stuff, since the hoppers pick up stuff in stacks, but will not be able to push it away. That's why we need to use some extra setup to pick up all the drops. I was actually debating to use some honey blocks feed tape just to cycle the honey blocks that they land on, so we can pull the items from the farm and put them to the side, since now items stick to the honey. But I decided to go with a way simpler method of just using a hopper minecart based super sucker system. One thing that's important to note is that among these 3 hoppers, the middle one, which is the magenta, sucks the most. And when initially testing distribution of items for all of these into 4 separate hoppers collectors each, which should give us a limit of 36,000 items per hour per sucking hopper, sometimes the items will get clogged up for the middle one. And the reason was actually because of swords. But I'll explain what was the problem on the actual system that properly sucks. So, with the magic of editing, here it is. And we can see that we need 2 hopper minecarts to properly spread away items for each individual sucker hoppers. These are the 3 sucker hoppers. Although each one of the hopper minecarts can suck in 72,000 items per hour, which is way more than needed, it still was possible that the top hopper would get stuffed with 1 free slot and all of the others filled with golden swords, which means that the bottom minecart was only capable of sucking in 1 type of item apart from all the non-stackable swords. This means that with a lot of items and unlucky situation, it was possible to cause 1 minecart to flip-flop between collecting a certain type of drop and then clearing it out on the other end for the other minecart, which can technically slow down the bandwidth by half to 36,000 drops per hour. But that would still be enough. But in this case, we also have some random pans, or the carrot, or most notably ingos, which are not guaranteed to have available in full stacks, meaning that it was still possible to clog up this entire minecart hopper pipe. To fix that issue, the side hoppers that typically receive little less are distributed over 4 hoppers, and the middle sucking hoppers get 2 extra ones for a total of 14 collection hoppers, and that's plenty of sucking power. So to place these minecarts in this weird sucky-uppy configuration is actually not that hard to do. We just need to have a floor first of 14 hoppers facing down, 2 blocks below the collection hoppers. Then we just put our 2 temporary blocks to place our minecarts on top of, as well as you should have these glass panes over here. In this configuration, you can use iron bars or end rods if you like. Then to place the minecarts, then we need to replace the blocks underneath them quickly with pistons with glass panes from the side. And then push those minecarts against these glass blocks. Now we go to the back and we place 2 grindstones, like so. And place another hopper minecarts here and just slide it in the corner formed by these grindstones. And that will fulfill our both side hopper configurations. You technically don't need these grindstones anymore if you do that, but it's good to keep them in case we nudge the minecarts by accidents later. We can just push them back into place. Then next step, we need to place a middle minecart under the 3rd middle hopper and just replace its block with a glass pane as well. Then we need to go to the back and place 2 extra glass panes like so, place a rail sideways and place 2 hopper minecarts on top of it. Then you need to walk into them, making sure that it is split into 2 directions. One direction is bad, 2 directions good. Then to remove carefully the rail and then push the minecarts forwards into the glass panes into the corner. Just make sure not to nudge the top minecart. Now what happens is that these minecarts on the sides will be sucking items to the hoppers since they are technically underneath them, and which will be then picked up by these minecarts or on the edges, following into those 4 hoppers at the bottom to suck this in, and then the minecart in the middle will be pulling items from the middle hopper, which will be then picked up by both of the hopper minecarts below and distributed into these 6 hoppers below it. One of the minecarts will be doing most of the work because of how minecarts work, with other one only picking up stuff when it's not possible for the first one to keep up with. This looks quite complex, but if you followed our simple here tutorial, it should be quite straightforward to pull off. Now with items nicely distributed over these 14 hoppers, the rest of the collection is pretty standard. We have each pair of hoppers with items feeding into a dropper that we have attached to an 18,000 per hour clock that seems to keep up with all the load, which shoots directly these items into the item stacker and item aligners, which are also known as cobwebs. These drop carefully collected loot into the staircase below, which pushes them gradually to the center. We use here light blocks. It's not accidental. It allows to prevent all spawns to happen, including social zombies that can otherwise spawn very close to the player and in quite high light levels. The item aligners are controlled here with this clock that runs as long as there are items flowing through the droppers. At the bottom we can see yet another very good use for a honey block, because it's not so full block on all of its sides. When it pushes the items, they will be pushed right to the edge of the ender chest, meaning that when we shove them with the slime block from the side, all the items will be gliding a little bit on the hoppers, allowing for the sorters to pick up all their drops, yet still glide the items on the ice. And after grabbing what we really need, we can deposit the rest of the crap into the cactus or lava. We just need to make sure that all the sorting area is properly lit, as social zombies can actually spawn on redstone components. In terms of sorting out all the goods, I recommend 2 sorters for gold ingots and at least 7 sorters for gold nuggets. I don't recommend double speed sorters as they grab items very unevenly, and I wouldn't be surprised if you need, for example, 5 of them to grab all the drops. And here, even with 7 sorters, so the capacity of technically 63,000 items per hour, where we only have 45,000 nuggets per hour, there's still a actually very slight chance that a couple nuggets will miss a sorter. So just something to keep in mind. So there you have it, guys. A relatively straightforward, not that difficult to build, and relatively powerful pigment gold farm that you can build in your world, and if you select the spot carefully, without an excessive need of spawn proofing of the farm area. So that would be it. Unless there wasn't an anti-design of a gold farm that's actually even simpler in principle, yet grindier to build. And I wouldn't have said that, but I know that there will be all sorts of comments here saying that, oh, it's not that simple of a farm, I forgot about this exploit. I haven't. And that revolves around the ability of pigment to actually spawn in the portal blocks without having the portal cooldown the way pigment that spawn on the overworld side that are spawned randomly from portal blocks. The thing is, back in the days there were no blocks and intended mechanics that would allow to create shortcuts in mob farming. The spawning of nether mobs in portals was a thing, but Mahuzi flag that went with it, like in Ray's Underlord farm, was preventing this exploit to be practical in any shape or form, leaving it only as a theoretical setup. When Mojang introduced magma blocks in 1.10, a block that could initially have various mobs spawn on top of them and make them take damage where they have spawned, was quickly made non-spawnable for mobs that would take damage from it. But then entity cramming came along in 1.11 with the stacked minecarts exploit to quickly kill the mobs. Then Wither Roses came about with all the mobs could technically spawn in them and immediately start taking damage, apart from Wither Skeletons. Is this either a sign of developers stopped caring about the technical balance, or just an arrival of a new, more kind of modded era, where a simple cookie-cutter solutions could actually be broadly applied for various resource farms without deep knowledge of the game? I don't think it's the latter, since the developers have recently brought back the balance of plant farming, removing the forced growth tick exploit. Regardless, going back to this thing, thanks to the optimizations with the portals, now going through them, especially when there's very little portal blocks on the other side, is actually extremely lag friendly. And if you pair it with an exploit of allowing mobs to spawn in nether portals and be instantly removed from the nether mob cap, makes for a very simple source of the nether drops. This obviously doesn't spawn all the mobs like Enderman that needs darkness to spawn, but all the other nether mobs can spawn in here. So in this case I used 3 high portals, so gas will not be able to spawn, but magma cubes will. So is it still a proper mob farm design? I don't think so. This is just a bunch of portals spewing out the mobs on the other end. But alas, it works, so I guess it's still a mob farm. It will require a lot of obsidian to build, and that's for sure will be most likely require a lot of elbow grease, not as much as the brain grease to get built. So in this case, I only build it in a 2x2 chunk area, meaning that all of the portals can link to a single portal placed perfectly centered on the overworld side. If you would build it larger, you can still do that. You just need to build additional collection spots scattered around your overworld. But for the demonstration purposes, I just left it to just 4 chunks with 1 collection spot. But other than that, we just have a portal, over yet another portal, and so long, almost up until the player AFK spot. So mob cap wise, you can still, on the nether side, it's almost nothing. But on the other side, it's an absolute mayhem. So can you build such a setup to get just a lot of gold? Yes. Would I build it myself? Definitely not. There's no challenge with this thing. It's only grind. And honestly, drop-wise, with this design and this size, it's roughly the same thing. Is this an exploit or an oversight? I would say yes. Will it ever get patched? Maybe. I would just stick to the proven and documented mechanics, even if they feel a little bit cheap as well. So on that bombshell, that's it guys for today. A combined maximum XP and looting based gold farm using Turtle X mechanics, producing over 9.
Hello there, right here, and today we will be looking
Bloop bloop bloop. L'autre chose qu'on peut regarder, c'est une Wither Rose Farm. C'est pas lui. Crazy.
Hello there, right here, and welcome back guys to another simple farm. This is a new updated 1.16 simple Wither Rose farm. Wither Roses will be automatically produced. Hello there, right here, and welcome back to another Minecraft farm video. Today I will be showing you guys my simple and safe Wither Rose farm. This is upgraded to use the new bubble column redirecting. In 1.16.2, they changed it so a lot of projectiles can now be redirected by bubble columns. And I did a whole video covering all the different projectiles and crazy stuff you can do with it, like prevent withers and dragons from ever hurting you. And I applied this to my Wither Rose farm here. We got some bubble columns, and if any skull would happen to get past the wither and try to go after the chicken, it will just get shot, redirected, and pointed down into the ground. The entire farm is pretty simple. There's not a lot of blocks to it. There's a spawning platform, there's a drop chute, there's a killing chamber, and then there is a wither cage with a single chicken as a target. We're also getting very close to 200,000 subscribers. So if you haven't already hit that button, make sure you do. It would mean the world to me. Wither Roses have quite a few uses, including making black dye as well as killing mobs very quickly. But one of the prominent uses for them is to make my 1.16 and above Wither Skeleton Skull farm. It's a simple yet highly effective farm in producing tons of wither skulls while you're AFK, which you can use to make beacons. And I actually designed a beacon farm, which automatically collects wither skulls, puts them onto soul sand, and kills the wither without even needing the player. Plus it gets all the other materials for your beacons. Now recently, Mumbo Jumbo actually used my previous Wither Rose farm on Hermitcraft to then eventually build up my simple Wither Skull farm. He managed very well in building up both of the designs and does a lot of cool redstone builds over at his YouTube channel, and I've linked it down in the description. And if you are from Mumbo's channel, tell me down in the comments. And in this video, I'll show the changes I made to the Wither Rose farm to make it even easier to build and making it safe for repetitive usage in the future. Now, I only changed a small part about my farm, so if you want to learn how to remove the portal block, summon in the Wither safely, as well as choose the ideal location, all that is covered in the previous video linked below. I also briefly cover the dimensions of this farm. The height is somewhat important, but the size of the spawning platform up here isn't very important. You can choose whatever size you want. And this is what the Endermite looks like with everything here. And I go into detail how to put this all in previous videos. But what I will be covering is the changes that I've made to this. The first minor change that I made is I removed the sorting system that sorts out the pearls from the Wither Roses. Just because you end up getting so many Wither Roses, you might only run this farm one time. But even if you wanted to run it more times, it's not too difficult to pull the Wither Roses away from the Ender Pearls. And it does make the build a bit more simpler than having some auto sorters there. The other thing I did was added in these bubble columns here. This will redirect any skull that would happen to get past the Wither so that he never ends up hurting the chicken. But let's just stop the Wither from shooting over there. There is 2 water sources right there, 2 right there, and 2 right there. And then this is where the soul sand is. So to put those in, I just put the soul sand in and then put water like that. And there, and there. That's all the water you need. And from the soul sands, there is 1, 2, 3, 4 blocks, and then we built in this little piece right here. Just a block the chicken is standing on, a torch, and a carpet to prevent Endermen from teleporting to it. The way that you know that the chicken is too far back is if the skulls are making it past the bedrock, hitting the bubble columns, and then being shot around it. I'd advise dropping the chicken onto this block here, and then kind of pushing him up against a wall so he's on that side. Then you can put in your torch and carpet. Now he's in the perfect location. And then we can just remove these blocks. It's just like that. Now the Wither can see the chicken. If you spectate the Wither, you can barely see the edge of the chicken. What's important is the red line here is how the chicken sees, and it's also how the Wither sees the chicken. Only if they both can see each other from the center of those red lines connected will the Wither attempt to shoot at him. His main head is shooting out this skull that's up here. 2 side heads are also shooting out skulls, but they're immediately being destroyed by the bedrock which they are inside of. And the side heads use the eyes from the main head to see the target. So even though their heads are inside of bedrock, they still think they can see the chicken, where the main head can actually really see the chicken. And that's why we have to prevent him from hitting the chicken. His skulls are currently going kind of at an angle, and they're clipping the edge of this bedrock here and being destroyed. But for safety reasons, if that bedrock was missing or if he would have to get a skull by, the bubble columns here will easily redirect the skulls up and over the chicken. Now the angle in which they are shot doesn't actually change, so they're kind of angled like this. Even though they go up a little higher, they're still angled, and they will eventually hit the ground. Some things to keep in mind is that most skulls that come out of the main head are these black ones. Like 1 in a couple thousand will be a blue one, and blue ones can actually destroy any type of block besides like bedrock and a couple other ones. And they can actually destroy liquid sources near the blocks that they hit. And that's why we don't have any water right here, at least sources, because they can be destroyed. The benefit of the Wither being able to see the chicken at any given moment is upon relogging or leaving the end dimension, coming back or unloading the chunks, the Wither will search around for a new thing to shoot at, and he will see this chicken over here and just start shooting it, when before you had to flick a lever and let him see the chicken but then hide it after he does find it. That was really difficult because people could accidentally load your farm without you knowing it and wouldn't flick the lever. Then the Wither would get bored and just start randomly shooting skulls. And he can even rotate, and then these side heads could be here, and then he could be shooting downwards, and he could shoot at this wall right here. Now normally the cobble wall would withstand these black skulls, but they can randomly shoot out blue ones like I said, and those can destroy pretty much anything. So I know some of you guys asked if you could waterlog this, would that protect it? And the answer is actually no, because blue skulls could destroy it. And here's a clip of the Wither actually shooting a blue skull. You can see how it destroys some of the water. So with this setup here, you don't have to worry about the farm acting differently when you come back to it. And with that size platform, the farm produces over 3,000 Wither Roses per hour. If you want more per hour, make the platform bigger. And the AFK spot is way up there where I have my alt account. Also have a command summoning in some Endermites so we can illustrate what's going on. That's commands over here if you want to turn it off. Now you don't actually have to spawn proof the island around these gateway portals, because when you're way up in the air, nothing is going to spawn on them. And Endermen aren't going to teleport there either, because they're going to immediately die on being killed over there. Just remember to cover everything else with double carpets so they don't end up teleporting to a nearby place, which they won't despawn from. Now if you have any questions on how to build this, I'd recommend just checking out the world download here. I have it linked below. You can see where every block is placed exactly. You can check out stuff like render distance, difficulty, and if you're ever having problems, you always can ask in the comments. It most likely has to do with your server running some mod like Spigot or Paper, in which case you should ask your admin. like to see more simple farms or maybe like look at complex farms or just some crazy glitches, I have a playlist for all 3 of those and they're fun to binge watch. I also have a series where I'm trying to farm up every item in the game Minecraft, so if you ever wonder if an item could be farmed, check out that list. And don't forget to leave a like as well as share this video with others. I'd like to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye!
Ça, j'en ai déjà fait une. Oh, with the powder of snow. Hey, c'est nouveau.
Hi guys, Gnemon here and welcome to 35th episode of Fun Farms. Today we have a new type of an XP farm that has some qualities that other farms don't have. And we'll look into 2 new mechanics in the game that make it possible, or at least make it a little bit more bearable and elegant. Shulker duping and mountain goats. Just kidding, it's XP stacking and powdered snow. Garden farms have been my favorite way of obtaining XP, not only because they give the most and the fastest XP of all the intended ways of getting it, but also it allows to have the XP farm close to home, in the overworld, so we don't rely on the other dimensions to provide us with XP. The thing is, even if you are playing on a busy server, it's good to diversify your XP sources anyway, so there is always a dimension you can use for a steady source of fast XP, whether this being an Enderman farm, Pigman farm or Guardian farm. And if you are playing on your own, Guardians is the best way to do it. However, traditional Guardian farms were not the most convenient to use. The thing is, speed is not everything. The hands-free Pigman XP farms are best when you need to use the XP for something else, to mend some tools or combine on the anvil large amount of items, juggling them in and out of the shulker boxes. This mechanic of letting the mobs drop XP when not directly killed by the player, or a dog, or a player potion or TNT, just from pure anger, is promised to be removed in 1.17 anyways, and having a new way of getting a lot of XP with minimum player interaction is in high demand. And this is where this concept of a mob farm comes into play. In other regular farms that works with single player, the speed of the farm is controlled how fast the farm can spawn mobs, as well as the mob cap, how many mobs are present in player's dimension. Therefore, it is important to strike a good balance of managing spawning speed and time it takes between spawning and harvesting of the mobs, given the available mob cap. In this farm today we'll be removing the mob cap component from the equation, allowing your farm to spawn mobs as fast as your computer can handle, and as a side effect you will not need to stand in one place while killing mobs constantly to clear out the mob cap, which would allow you to have much more time to do what you need with your XP, man and combine stuff. What else do you need the XP for? So in this farm we'll be spawning mobs with the player in the overworld, moving them to the nether right after they spawn. This removes them from the mob cap, allowing more mobs to spawn. But it also allows them to build up in the nether where they are not affected by the mob cap as a reservoir. Mobs that change the dimension will need to be moved out of any portals for the next 15 seconds, but that's a good timing to build up substantial number of them. Right after that 15 seconds passes, first mobs will be re-entering the overworld, potentially softened and ready for the player, which will fill up the mob cap then quite quickly to 70, blocking new spawns. However, this will happen with the pipeline of mobs still in the nether waiting to go to the overworld, with the newest mobs just entering the nether at this point. So it'll take another 15 seconds to clear up that pipeline. So in total 35-40 seconds give or take per cycle. That gives us 2 things. First of all, we don't need to actively swipe at the Guardians with swords and potions to get the XP, since they'll be coming in very large batches, every 40 seconds or so. And if there's at least 180 Guardians in a batch, which is 5 per second, which is what we need to get maximum XP of from Guardians, we will be getting a maximum XP per player that we can ingest. However, with a good enough spawner, we should be able to get much more than 180 of them. You see, there is nothing that caps their spawning for the entirety of this 15 seconds, which means that the amount of Guardians that will held on the other side should only be limited how much our computer or server admin can handle, and it can do much more than 180. We'll be aiming for about 450-500 of them, and that will be plenty to get us fully experienced for almost 2 minutes. There are 2 new things in 1.17 that make such a setup possible. First is quite obvious, the new XP stacking mechanics. Now let's quickly cover some XP basics. Mobs drop XP of various amounts that breaks down into orbs of fixed XP point values, 1, 3, 7, 17, etc. That series quickly grows and most mobs drop only orbs that are worth 1, 3, or 7 points anyways. Player can ingest 10 of these orbs per second. Enderman, for example, drops 5 XP and Guardians 10 XP, twice as much. But since 5 can only be divided into 3 orbs, valued in 3, 1, and 1, this means that it will take us longer to slurp all that XP comparing to the Guardians, which produces only 2 orbs, 3 and 7. This means that the Enderman farm lets you get only 60,000 XP per hour, and the Guardian farms 180,000, 3 times more. All other mobs fall somewhere in between. Now, previously to 1.17, if you would attend an XP farm that produces way too much XP comparing to what you can ingest, that would create a massive lag at some point, which might as well crash your game. That doesn't happen in 1.17, and the reason is that XP orbs that have the same XP value and are close enough and have a similar enough entity ID, which is a little bit technical, would form one XP ball that represents them both. And with more XP orbs coming, they can stack even more than that. So at the end, you should end up with a maximum of 40 orbs for each XP value, regardless of how much initial orbs they represent. This, however, doesn't change the speed with which we can ingest them. Every time an orb could merge with the player, it only reduces its stack count by 1, simulating ingestion of one of the previous orbs, and the rest of the stack continues to ride around the player. So I have here added a simple visualizer to show the stack counts of all the orbs that have more than one orb inside of them, so you can see how they decrease relatively slowly. This has several interesting implications. First of all, you can just spam your sword like there is no tomorrow, creating more and more XP, since all of the newer orbs will at some point just merge with the existing ones, keeping the number of XP orbs entities in check. The cool thing about that orb when merged will refresh their despawn timer, meaning that even if you are busy doing combining and mending, you can just come back to the mobs from time to time to get a few new orbs to refresh the current ones, giving them a few more minutes until they despawn. Every time we do it, we get an extra 5 minutes on our XP orbs. The second side effect, it's a minor one, is that particularly Enderman farms don't suck as much as before, especially at the beginning. What happens is that since there is twice as much orbs of value 1 than 3, all the small orbs form simply twice as larger stacks, meaning that it takes them twice as longer to get depleted and get fully ingested. This makes so that the first 66% of the time the player will be ingesting XP at the rate of 72,000 XP per hour, not 60, and at the remaining third of the time at 36,000 XP per hour, so very slow. This means that if you're done with whatever you were meant to do at an Enderman farm, you can just fly out and shake off all the remaining less valued orbs, knowing that you have benefited from slightly faster XP rates at the beginning. So one concept that's technically possible, but would be very difficult to execute, is to filter out orbs of smaller value from the mix of orbs of mixed values. That was impossible to do previously, since all XP orbs behave exactly the same and the difference in appearance was only visual. Now, technically it would be possible to use, let's say, a mix of orbs from an Enderman, which has orbs of value 1 and 3, to interact with the Guardian orbs valued at 3 and 7. The problem is when orbs merge, they always merge other orbs to them, and the order of which orbs are being processed is based on the hash order, meaning that it's not that orbs that were created first will have a priority over the orbs that are created later. So sorting orbs is now technically possible, it just might be prohibitively difficult to pull off because of that little detail. Another option that's actually much more doable is to create some generator with a very heavy flow of mix of orbs of different values, like 3 and 7 from Guardians, which is definitely possible, and then build up some crazy amount of XP orbs that would technically give us a very long ingestion time ahead of us. And then right before they would reach their spawn limits, if you could provide the player with a reliable source of orbs of size 7 without the orbs of size 3, we could sustain that initial large source of size 7 orbs for longer, giving us a boost from 180,000 XP per hour to over 250,000 XP per hour. So unlike the XP orb filtering, this is actually much more doable, but probably still not worth the hassle to do that at this point. So these were some potential benefits of the new XP stacking, but the main benefit is that we don't need to be scared of XP farms that simply over-provide XP orbs, since it eliminates the core reason why they lacked in the first place. They are now much more usable and practical. You can still kill your game with it, just not by XP orbs. Today we'll devise a similar farm to this one, with the little change that you don't need a whole server of players to operate it, and you can operate it on your own, even in your single player world. Another new feature for 1.17 that comes in very handy is the new powdered snow. For all intent and purpose, that new powdered snow acts pretty much like the less extreme cobweb, just with a different handling and finally renewable, with an extra damage if the entity stays for more than 15 seconds in it. Well, it's still funny that it deals damage to all the mobs, even those that shouldn't be affected by it, like snow foxes, polar bears, but also snowmen of all things, that should thrive, maybe even should survive in powdered snow even in hot biomes, still takes freezing damage from snow. Unless I guess this snowman is just secretly Olaf and just loves summer. Some of the use cases of Cobweb that I've been using all the time is to align items thrown from droppers. Cobweb was useful to stack up items in transport, but was creating a significant delay in delivery. With powdered snow, it has pretty much the same function, just it's much more immediate. The ability of holding the entities in check is especially useful for guardians, which always hopped around, and in this case we can store them for a very short time in a place and they don't even jump around when damaged, and that's pretty useful. We actually won't be using this mechanic here, but it's useful nonetheless, it's worth keeping in mind. What we'll be using here is the ability of powdered snow to act as a delay in entities' fall, making them all effectively act like chickens. That worked the same way in principle with cobwebs before, but it was taking more than 30 seconds to go for a single guardian through one of them. And on top of that, if you had a steady stream of mobs, that would pretty much guarantee cramming damage. With powdered snow we have a redstone-less delay of mobs in transport which would not cram them, and we should be able to customize how long we want them to fall. For most mobs, falling speed through snow is 1.55 blocks per second, and for chicken 0.93, if you need that information for something. One more component that we'll need is the mob storage and the cramming prevention. We would want to be able to store a large number of mobs in one spot, and the standard ways to prevent cramming in one place is using ladders or vines. Initially that looked like a weird hack, but if you look at the logic behind it, how it's defined in the code, cramming is the effect of excessive pushing, and there is another mechanic that disables pushing when entities are climbing on blocks. This way we will not be, for example, pushed off of a ladder when climbing in with other players. That makes sense. And there's another place in the code that defines that the entity is climbing if it's in one of the specific climbable blocks, and this way, being in that space occupied by a ladder or a vine, it won't be pushed, but it also won't cram. So how you would typically do that, you would either fill up the space with ladders or vines that would prevent cramming in the entire space, or just to apply that method on the sides where the mobs tend to typically aggregate. This way we can still keep that safety block zone where even with couple hundred mobs in the chamber of this size, occasional mobs moving back and forth may still fill that single spot of cramming of 24 mobs, keeping the very high number of entities still in check. Now, however, the list of all climbable blocks have grown significantly, and we have different properties that are worth considering. Ladders have their own collision box and, like vines, needed to be placed on the side of some block, and that limited our abilities to do cramming safe chambers. Now we can use scaffolding, which needs to be placed on a solid surface or on the side of another scaffolding block, plus it provides a one-way collision surface from the top, which might be useful in some cases. On top of that, the climbable category also have both beanstalk types, and they both don't need to have any support on the side like ladders or vines. So weeping vines need to be attached from the top and twisting vines at the bottom, and with them we can actually create a large area that would prevent cramming without our needs of having a side walls, which is pretty neat. And that's what we'll be using here in our guardian setup. So, speaking of the devil, here's the setup that I created with all of this in mind. It starts with some basic guardian spawner cells that move the guardians to the nether and move them quickly. You can use whatever you want for that, as long as in general it moves them upwards. We'll need to drop them from quite a high distance to account for the powdered snow and the extra fall damage for guardians, and we will need the portals for the player below, so these need to be significantly higher. You could use some other spawner designs like the TT's Waterlogged Stairs based one, or even the downwards flowing one, but that simple soul sand base I use in my multiplayer garden farm is simple, fast and sufficient here. What is important is to remove the monument and clean up all the water. Yes, you can make a garden farm without that, but it will make it super slow and not worth it. If you only need a few shards to make a few conduit setups and you don't care all about garden XP or sea lanterns, that's fine. But in all other cases, it's just not worth your AFK time on a crappy farm if you can spend that time doing this exciting task of cleaning up the monument area. I have several videos on the channel discussing several ways to do that from the creative perspective and also from the survival perspective. However, if you just want to do that quickly and be done with it, I strongly recommend removing the monument with the invisibility potions and haste, and then remove all the water using flying machines. And for the walls, I just recommend nothing. With a few simple tricks, you can use flowing water as a natural barrier that doesn't require any blocks to be placed and looks really sick. Another thing, like with any mob farms, you need to light up the caves around the area. The good thing is you don't actually need to be super thorough with that. If you have selected a monument in the middle of a large ocean, you will not have any surface to take care of either. Flooded water caves are all fine. Slime chunks from time to time are fine too, as well as drowned. This farm does not strictly depend on having a super clean mob cap like some other farms do. As long as there is some spawning spots available, it should be fine. Guardians, just by hanging around downstairs waiting to be slain by the player, will create a natural mob switch, making occasional slime and a few mobs here and there, including drowned, naturally despawn over time as you use this farm. If you feel like you've done super sloppy job with the general spawn proofing of the area, you can just have more of those spawning chambers, increasing the spawning potential of your farm, or reduce it if it's a little too much and generates too many guardians. The thing is, this setup over here with the exact dimensions and sizes of those spawning tanks, it's something that I created using experimentation, which turned out to be exactly what my laptop could handle. So in your cases, you can adjust it to your needs, or your admin needs. If you can handle more than 500 guardians at once like I do, feel free to add more and lengthen these spawning cells. That's something that you would need to try on yourself, but that's easy to tweak one way or the other. So after guardians spawn, they will be moved to the nether and they will be immediately dropped into the columns of powdered snow. And here to keep them for 15 seconds in the nether, we need 22 blocks of powdered snow. And that's the reason I kept the top portal of minimum size, so we only need 88 blocks in total of this stuff. As you can see, I have enabled here a portal cooldown information on the guardians as they come through, so you can see that all of them actually lose all their cooldown the moment they leave the powdered snow, so that's timed perfectly. Then we follow with 30.5 blocks of drop, which brings guardians to a very consistent 1 to 2 hearts of life, unlike using some other metals that recently became extremely inconsistent like lava. So in total we need at least a 55 blocks clearance between the top portal, where the guardians are spewing out, at the bottom portal when we put them back into the overworld. So here I'm just leaving guardians to go through the portal on their own. I just don't see a reason to have anything special to move them quicker. It's quick enough. On the sides here we have some safety lava in case there is a guardian that manages somewhere to fall through, still having some leftover portal cooldown. If they touch another portal, that would keep them infinitely here, which I'm here mitigating but allowing them to fall through into lava. However, from my observations, powdered snow is behaving really nicely in drawing them down in a very consistent manner, and these openings here exist here in case a player falls through as well somehow, so you don't need to go into lava as guardians, so you have some escape route as well. Or if it's that chamber is not so busy, you can just exit here to the side. Safety first. And that's all of it here in the nether. But before we go, let me show you what else I had before when I was working on this concept, when we didn't even know about the powdered snow. And here it is. So I used here fence gates, letting guardians to drop one step at a time by alternating with redstone which one stays open. The initial fall to 1 heart was not guaranteed, as some of them had 2 or more health points more than others. The setup, in the use case I needed, was still not preventing all the cramming to happen as well, so it was quite messy, but with powdered snow, all of this can be done right now and replaced just with a few blocks of snow, so that's actually great. It solves the inconsistency issues. A redstone should always be your last effort, and it's so much cleaner. So now looking at the ancient tech, let's go back to 1.17. We are here just below the monument, by the way, aligned so that the nether portals at the bottom match nicely with this one over here. Guardians do like water, and it not only sedates them but also pushes them to the front. However, we cannot have 500 guardians held in water since they will cram, and that's why they will be pushed into the space which is filled with weeping vines, meaning that this entire area makes guardians quote-unquote climbing, making them not pushable, so not crammable. Pretty nice. And it makes sense, doesn't it? A few implementation details. We have here 2 waterlogged stairs that makes it a valid water source, making so that the sources placed over here in the corners will fall into these blocks and then spill all over the vines, since the vines will actually break when flooded. So I used here weeping vines. You could probably use twisting vines here or even scaffolding, but I just haven't checked actually. I didn't need to. Sue me. Okay, since it's not a farm primarily for drops, I don't even know how much we will be getting here drop-wise. That's how much I don't care about it. It's primarily for XP. Just kidding. I was measuring 110,000, killing them as they come in batches every 40 seconds or so while switching to the looting sort, but that was with the hoppers backing up. So if you had a good collection setup, that would be actually much more than that. So without looting, just by throwing potions every 40 seconds, that gave me 65,000 drops per hour, which did actually get collected fully, so that's refreshing. This means that we were getting 150,000 with the looting before. However, if you actually use this farm as an XP source, so you would wait until you exhaust your XP and throw the potions only when you need it. And that gives a throw every 90 seconds or so, giving us about 800 drops per throw or 30,000 drops per hour as a byproduct. That should be sufficient for all your guardian drop needs, and if you're in a pinch you can always whip up your looting sword and back up the hoppers if you choose to do so. So for the items, we cannot just put hoppers right at the floor of the guardian chamber, because XP orbs would now get stuck on the insides of the hoppers. So we need some sort of solid blocks in the floor and use just hopper minecarts to grab the items. XP orbs will be naturally going straight to the player and items will be sucked down. There is no magic in terms of placing of the hopper minecarts. You should just put the closest one first, then another, let it slide a little bit, and then one more. The key is that these guys will be grabbing more loot, since the rest of the items will be pushed here from the back to the front with the water that's flashing down. But since they'll be sitting on 2 hoppers simultaneously, that removes the items from them at double speed, so you should be good. So on the side here we have a detection of when player throws a potion with a long delay that's attached to it. The dropper over here will give us a new potion right away, so we don't need to fiddle with the inventory looking for the space for the new potion next time. But the thing is, guardians go from the overworld to the nether to get transported, loading the nether, but they will spend a little bit more than 15 seconds in the nether as well, meaning that the guardian tickets that load the nether and keep the guardian processed may expire with some guardians still left in the pipes, so to speak. And since we rely on the fact that we'll clear up all the mobcap, making sure that entire new batch has a new space to spawn, it actually may be important to make sure that all those guardians end up in the overworld. And that's why we have here this very long delay that will be sending one item through the portal right after the last guardian should be able even to spawn, loading the nether for this extra 15 seconds, making sure that the entire batch has a chance to go through to the overworld. Optionally, we can replace it with just a single 14 seconds chunk loader, throwing items back and forth. It doesn't matter as long as you keep the nether loaded. It all should be fine. But in this case, we just need to throw one item per one potion throw, so I think that's the most sufficient approach in this case.
In
the back of the portal, there is nothing. Guardians are repelled by the solid blocks, and that's what we want. Since the cramming zone is at the back of the portal chamber, we should rather make sure that they don't want to go towards the wall. So that portal would rather put on the wall rather than in the center of some large decorative room. There will be plenty of space for decorations over on this end, and that will be all the secrets of this XP farm. In terms of using it, you would probably have some sort of another access to it through a portal that you match so it wouldn't end up in the collection portal, nor garden